Our Town, Massena, by Anthony J. Romeo. Happiness, 1968. Excuse me if I don't look into the camera because I'm going to have to read what was written. For a second time in 2 years, I was fortunate enough to revisit the town of my earlier years and to enjoy the happiness engendered by such visits. I was greatly prepared for the wonderful reception given to me by the Massena Observer's personnel, nor the tribute to my own column by Stanley Capello. The invitation to appear at Rotary on WMSA Radio by Sammy Frazier. The delightful interview on the air by Jean LePage. There was the hospitality of my brother Joe, the overwhelming generosity of his wife Anne, the wonderful reunion with my immediate family, and the wonder at the steady increase in the number of relatives. Can I ever wonder the heart-warming handshakes of friends I knew, in the recognition of many who knew me only from this column, or the wonderful words they said to me? How could anyone take for granted the most delightful evening afforded by Mrs. Romeo and myself and Mr. and Mrs. Leonard Prince, the company of Miss Anne Emberhart, a special guest, or the tender words of Mrs. Prince, who referred to me as the Observer's Hollywood correspondent? The evening at the Village Inn is one to be remembered for years to come. Certainly, any person would be honored by such consideration shown him by people in his own hometown. But do all these courtesies tell the whole story? The story is there, but I would like, if I may, to bring out the true beauty of it all. Certainly, there are many people who have done something of account and perhaps should have some recognition of his works. But this is the only small segment of the entire picture. The real recognition should go to those people who have the gallant gestures they do in deference to the persons they honor. How could anyone but anything at all if it were not for those wonderful souls who make great efforts to tell the world about his exploits, or even his humble efforts to take his place in society? An autobiography would be a fertile thing indeed, if the life of the autobiographer were not spread to the corners of the earth by well-meaning folks who recognize any worthy effort put forth by him during his lifetime of usefulness. The fact that our town has the wonderful people who hail the works of others is the answer to why Massena is such a wonderful place to live. A town to brag about, and one to revere forever. I challenge any to compare our town, any other its own size, or any smaller or larger. Others may boast greater populations, more resources, places of amusement, or anything else one would care to mention. But how many can show a better football team or other sports organizations, a better school, better living conditions, better shops, a better newspaper, a low crime rate, and most important, better citizens? Compare anything, whether countywide, statewide, or nationwide, statistically and percentage-wise, the result is always the same. the tributes to me or to any citizen are not so outstanding as are the efforts of those who gratefully and warm-heartedly give them. Without such acts of recognition, the doer would die of frustration possibly. But with them, he is spurred, do likewise, in even such greater things, knowing their efforts will not go unnoticed. The conspiracy which resulted in the taking over of this column for the purpose of a tribute to me was hatched by the people at the Observer, my brother, and of course the head conspirator, Stan Capello. To Stan, I wish to say this: were it not for the abilities, the endurance, and the verve of those whom I guided in stage productions, etc., not only would my efforts have been fruitless, but I certainly would not have even made them. Yes, I was at times a rough taskmaster, but only because I recognized talent which lay within each and every one who came under my direction. I was determined it would show itself, and it did. Lesser students would have told me what I could do with my productions, but rather they stood their ground, weathered by my barb, accepted and made use of any advice, advanced offer advice, and went on to give professional performances, despite the fact that some were appearing for the first time in a public performance. Tony's talking about the old minstrel shows in Massena. And Stan Capello, I considered a friend of mine, talked highly about him, along with other people I knew that are now deceased. But let me go back. Yes, I remember throwing an overshoe at a school teacher who was most probably knew more than I'll learn in a lifetime. I remember jousting with men who had positions superior to mine. I remember simulating a tremendous loss of temper to get a point across. But I also remember the grace with which each one took my abuse, knowing that we all had one thing in mind: a performance worthy of the price people paid to see it. In my final analysis, I can truthfully say I never had to be ashamed of any production I was associated with. 45 in the last 25 years of my stay in Massena. And why? Because I always had a winning team. Always the credit must go to those who slaved and sweat with me. Alone I could have accomplished nothing. As you personally, Stan Capello, I must say you certainly ought to know even better than perhaps the others about abuse. I gave you more than you other aspirant. So, must more credit to you for taking it and profiting therefrom. But reading this, his words in the beginning stand true. Massena must stand proud. It must be proud of what we have here. No matter what happens in the future. A lot of us are going through hard times. People are afraid of the future. But we must go on and endure, no matter how poor or rich we are. And we have to keep old-time spirit alive, such as those words I read from Tony Romeo in 1968. Words that we have to think of about our own hometowns, in my hometown, and how granted we are to have what friends we manage to have in our lives. through good and bad.
Hey, excuse me, keep it down. We got some more business to do. I appreciate everybody deciding to want to wrap up.
A project with the same words for communities that care information.
Just like it exactly. Clean and bright. Look, the old one is hopefully I can hear you over the noise and the honking.